I'm Judy Shaw for NYSE Floor Talk. Joining me today is Gavin Filmore. Gavin is head of iPath Exchange Traded Products at Barclays. Gavin, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining me.
Great to see you, Judy. So happy to be here.
Thank you. Now, a quick note to our viewers. This interview is for informational purposes only. The NYSE doesn't recommend any investments or investment strategies. All right, so Gavin, tell me about Barclays' relationship with Professor Schiller and how you've partnered with him in the past.
Yeah, so I think, the first thing I always like to talk about here is just how deep that relationship and partnership is. So obviously we launched this index, which is the CAPE sector index, which was one of the first indices we launched back in 2012 and ultimately launched the ETN that relates back to it. But that work started many years before that. So we had to reconstruct over 40 years of earnings data for those sectors. And that was a very deep analysis that went in both between Barclays and Professor Shiller, and important to both sides to get right and really apply that academic rigor, if you will, to it. Ultimately, that produced an index, which is the index that we use in the ETN, and it fundamentally utilizes the CAPE ratio, the cyclically adjusted price per earnings ratio. Finally, that work and development continues to this day. So we work very, very closely with Professor Schiller and his team, constantly looking at new ideas, new bits of intellectual property that he might be thinking about. So we've produced a real full suite of indices and products around that, which we're really proud of and have become real flagships for us here.
Okay, so now you mentioned the CAPE ratio being used as a key driver for the valuation of sectors. Can you tell me more about the ratio?
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe just before we get there, just quickly, how does the ETN work? So the ETN tracks an index. That's true of any ETN. In this case, it's the Shiller Barclays CAPE Sector Index. And what does it do? Well, obviously it uses, as you asked, Judy, the CAPE ratio. But what makes the CAPE ratio different? So that's the cyclically adjusted price per earnings ratio, which was developed in the 1980s by Professor Schiller and some other academics that he worked with. And the core difference there is it uses a longer kind of historical window of time to evaluate earnings data, and it uses 10 years. That's very different than the more standard price per earnings ratio that many people are familiar with. And then the other key difference is that it does it on a relative basis. So not all sectors are the same, right? Technology will, pretty consistently look highly valued when it's compared up against other sectors. But on an individual basis, you have to look at technology over its own track record and see how it performs. So ultimately, what does the index do? It applies the CAPE ratio to the S&P 500 sectors. It evaluates the 5 that look the cheapest using the CAPE ratio. It does one more thing. It applies a momentum filter to try to identify the value trap and exclude that. Again, that value trap is something that you would hear Professor Schiller talk about. He's worked on that specifically over the years. And then it ultimately just allocates to 4 sectors. It's a pretty easy outcome. It rebalances on a monthly basis, and that's what our ETN provides.
So finally, where can institutional investors listen to insights directly from Professor Schiller, as well as learn more about your strategies?
Yeah, so we definitely always encourage everybody, as you've heard me say in the past, give us a ring. So my team and myself are always happy to talk to anybody, any financial advisors in the market that are interested in our products. You can reach us at 212-528-7990. And of course, you can visit our website, ipathetn.com, where you can get our email address and other information about our products. But I also really wanted to highlight the fact that we have a call with Professor Schiller next Monday. That's at 4:30 p.m. If you reach out to us, we'd be more than happy to get you included on that call. And that's a great opportunity to kind of hear it from Professor Schiller directly. We'll talk about CAPE's performance, as well as some of the market dynamics that we're seeing of late and kind of the interest or renewed interest in value. And we think it's just so important to get that in the hands of ultimately the consumer of our products.
All right, Gavin, it's always great to talk with you. Thanks for joining me on NYSE Floor Talk.
Great. Thanks so much for having me, Judy. Really appreciate it.